So, good morning, everybody. My name is Will Nichols, and today I'm going to talk to you about our Constitution here in the United States. According to your survey, on average, most of you believe that you knew the Constitution pretty well. You also indicated that you may want to know a little bit more about it and how it affects your everyday life. So let me ask you this to start off with. Is slavery still legal in the United States of America? And that's a very simple question that you might jump to the answer to. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to fully answer that question. So obviously we are talking about the Constitution, and I am no expert, but like my survey asked, I did once take a class on it. But my own personal growth and my own experience with the political system, and this being an election year, has led me to challenge my knowledge of the Constitution and seek out, without guidance, the answers that I need. So I'll be touching on the Constitution itself. I'll be talking about the Bill of Rights, which are the first 12 amendments to the Constitution, and then wrapping up with the rest of the amendments. So full disclosure, I have some strong political beliefs, and although I've tried to keep my bias out of this, in order to shorten my speech and allow it to fit into the amount of time, there might be some selection bias. So I just want to disclose that you've been warned. So I'm only human. So without further ado, let's talk about the Constitution itself. The Constitution was initially not supposed to exist. A group of men were given the task of editing the Articles of Confederation, our first shot at government here in the United States. What they came up with was a whole new way of running our government. And in 1787, 39 men signed the Constitution. The Constitution it has a strength that's commonly referred to as checks and balances. The power has been distributed into three branches: the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. So our Congress, the Supreme Court, and the President. The Constitution, however, also defends the government from the people, which I don't think is commonly known. James Madison said, one of the authors of the Constitution, "Pure democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention." What he's referring to is our Constitution. It doesn't define a democracy. It's actually important to understand that our Constitution describes a republic. So we are much like the Republic of the Congo or the Banana Republic. We're the Republic of America. And a lot of people will describe it as a democratic republic. So contrary to the belief of the time, large republics were considered to lead to tyranny. And so it was something that was feared when the Constitution was being written. In Article 10 of the Federalist, which is a composition of a bunch of articles that were written at the time, James Madison wrote, "If you take in a greater variety of parties and interests, you make it less probable that the majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens." So he postulated that a large republic could work as long as you had parties that didn't all share the same interests and you let everybody voice an opinion. So another limitation of the Articles of Confederation that had to be addressed was the ability to amend it. The Articles of Confederation at the time required unanimous votes in order to make any changes to it. The Constitution, as it's written, has the two-thirds law. So two-thirds of both the House and the Senate have to approve an amendment. This makes it hard, but not impossible, to make changes. So during the construction of the Constitution, there were actually two groups, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, because they lacked the imagination for more creative names. The Federalists, who believed in strong federal government, won out as far as the construction of the Constitution was, because we do have a strong federal government. However, this did lead to a point where the Anti-Federalists kind of got a consolation prize, and that consolation prize is the Bill of Rights, which I'll get into in a minute. Tyndall wrote in his book, America, A Narrative History, that both sides, he's referring to the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists, were convinced that the people must erect safeguards against tyranny, even the tyranny of the majority. Again, referring back to the fact that the government is protected from the majority as well. So the Bill of Rights were designed to appease those in the anti-federalist group and protect against said tyranny. So now that we know the gist of the Constitution, I'd like to get into a little bit more about the first 12 amendments to the Constitution, which are the Bill of Rights. Now, the Bill of Rights were all introduced around the same time, however, ratified at different times. And the first 8 deal with the rights of the individual. The last 4 deal with the rights of the state. So, again, I'm trying to avoid listing, so I'm not going to go through these one by one. I'm just going to tell you what I think is important to us. So the first 8 amendments include things like protecting our rights of assembly, our ability to protest if need be, peacefully anyways. Religious freedom, which is a hot topic these days. The freedom of speech, which is something that our country has enjoyed for much longer than other countries. The right to bear arms, and that's not the right to bear arms to protect our households from burglars or take what you want. The reason we have the right to bear arms is that if our government gets too oppressive, we have the ability to take it by force. Not to incriminate oneself, which I don't know if anyone's watching the O.J. Simpson American Crime Story, but Mark Furman gets on the stand and goes, "I plead the Fifth Amendment." And that's because he doesn't want to reveal information that would put himself in jail. The right not to be imprisoned without just cause, and that bail and fines be set at reasonable ranges. Now, the last 4 amendments, the last 4 of the Bill of Rights, are rights reserved by the state. The Constitution reads, and I quote, "The powers not delegated to the U.S. by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." They're basically calling dibs. So anything that's not specifically described in the Constitution, a state can say, hey, that's our right now. And if a state doesn't say that, then it's assumed that it's the people's right. This part of the Constitution also sets up the Electoral College, which deserves a speech of its own I'm not really going to get into. And that's kind of what's set up in those last 4. So now we've gone over the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We'll talk about the last few amendments, which the first one is the 13th Amendment, and that abolishes slavery in the United States. Again, the Constitution reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereof the party have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States." So slavery is prohibited unless you commit a crime. So those people in jail and those people on probation and parole are actually titled wards of the state. They are indeed slaves. The 14th Amendment deals with defining qualifications for servitude in government, and like the president has to be an actual born citizen, things like this. The 15th provides voter rights to everyone-ish, except for women. Sorry. The 16th is income tax, which is due very shortly. The 18th takes away alcohol, and the 21st gives it back. The 19th, finally, in 1920, gives women the right to vote. So congratulations, and sorry it took so long. I found the most interesting was the 27th Amendment, and it was interesting because of, well, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It was ratified in 1992. And what it does is it limits the ability for Congress to give itself outrageous promotions. Congress has the ability to set what Congress gets paid, which imagine if you went to work and said, hey boss, this is what I get paid now, and boss couldn't say anything about it. So this means what the 27th Amendment does is it allows for Congress to still give themselves raises. However, that raise is not in effect until the next election. So if they come in and say, hey, we all want an extra $100,000 a year, none of us as constituents are going to elect them again. So that's a deterrent for them to do that. What was interesting about this is that, like I said, it was ratified in 1992. However, it was introduced in 1789. So for over 200 years, this bill sat there, and no one said, hey, let's take a vote on this. Good old Congress. So, my friends, in a nutshell, that is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the other amendments. And like I said, I did leave a bunch of stuff out. You can always check it out online. You Google U.S. Constitution, and it comes up. The foundation for the distribution of rights lie within the framework of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the rest of the amendments. So what I'll do is I'll leave you with the words of a very wise man, Abraham Lincoln. And this was spoken during his debates with Douglas, his running mate, opposition. The people of the United States are the rightful masters of both Congress and courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution. Thank you for your time.